Hello everyone and welcome to Thorough Newspaper Analysis, which is brought to you by LawSeco. Basically, today the most important topic that we will be discussing is the gross domestic product, which is the GDP. As we could see that all over the newspapers, both the Hindu and the Indian Express, were mostly covered with the topics that we're discussing about the GDP and basically the negative growth of GDP that has been seen in this pandemic situation. So here there were a lot of articles, but the most comprehensive one was from the explained section of the Indian Express, which was titled as minus 23.9%, the economics behind the maths. So basically, herein almost all the points which are crucial for us to understand in totality regarding the GDP and what is the current scenario of GDP in India that have been discussed. And that is why we have decided to take this up for the day. And secondly, as we all know, we have the news in flash column wherein we'll be discussing the small and crisp news pointers that are more, important for the prelims exam. Now here we have a lot of courses for you at the LawSeco platform, and the main and the subject, the best one would be the lot of the courses, which is the judiciary test prep course, and the link is there in the description box. You can definitely go and check out its details, and there you can also download for yourself free study material, which is very appropriate for the preparation of exam. Then we have various other courses also, and very shortly we are also coming with the law optional course as well. So this is the MCQ for the day. GDP stands for first, genuine domicile portfolio; second, gross demand product; third, gross domestic product; or fourth, general democratic privilege. So you have to write down your answer in the comment section below to whatever is the right answer to this question. Now let's see that what is the descriptive question for the day. Discuss about the primary areas of Indian economy that needs to be revitalized in order to gain back the GDP growth. So as we know that not all the sectors of the economy have been hit equally with this falling GDP, and that is why you have to highlight in this answer as to which are the key areas which need more of attention, and also obviously you should write down some steps related to it. Then the answer to this question has to be written within a word limit of 250 to maximum 300 words, and you can jot it down in the comment section below as well. Now let's quickly start with the discussion talking about the economics behind the GDP data. As to currently, as we know that we have had to see this negative contraction, basically a negative growth of GDP by minus 23.9% in the first quarter of 2020 to 2021. Now as we know that a financial year, unlike a normal year, does not start from the 1st of January. Rather, it actually starts from 1st of April. Thus, if we talk about the financial year for 2020 to 2021, it did not start from the 1st January 2020. Rather, it started from 1st April 2020, which will continue to 31st March 2021. So that would actually, this amounts to be a financial year. Now, in this scenario, keeping in mind the COVID-19 impact and also the time when the very first lockdown was pronounced in the country, so it was after end of March. Basically, the time when we entered into the first quarter of the financial year of 2020-2021, we were already in an economic lockdown situation, and that is why obviously it was quite much acceptable and obvious that the economic situations in this first quarter, as now it has ended, would not be really good. Let's first understand as a basic theme as to how these quarters are divided. Now, as we know that quarters are something that are 1/4 part of something. So similarly, like in a whole year, in the complete financial year, wherein we have 12 months, then every quarter is divided into 3 months each. So that is why, since then, April, May, June. So for that, after that, the report for this first quarter has been received as to what was the economic growth or depreciation that took place in this period. And now, since the report has been made open by Ministry of Statistics and Program Implementation, we now unfortunately have got to know that we have had a contracted economy of minus 23.9%. So basically, this is as a comparison to the month-wise comparison to various years. So this was the condition at the time of January 2018. Then, as we know that since last 1 to 2 years, the economy had already been contracting in India. So then January 2019, it further became less. And then as compared to January 2020, it became less. But then after that, it came to a negative number of minus 23.9%. And then this is a global comparison wherein all the economies obviously of the world have seen slowdown and they have had negative economy. Like for example, the largest one to be seen in US, which has seen a, that we can say an economic contraction for minus 32.9%. And then after that we have India, of course, which is on minus 23.9%, which are followed by UK, then France, Italy, Canada, Germany, Japan, and China. Now, with this, what do we understand? So, like, if we make a comparative analysis with the past, so what can we actually draw from the situation? Firstly, since 1991, Indian economy grew at an average 7% GDP per year. So as we know that the year 1991 has been a really very remarkable and memorable for the Indian economy, wherein the basic three concepts of LPG, that were the liberalization, privatization, and globalization, were brought in during the time of 1991. And at this time, it should also be known that, so the then person at that time, Dr. Manmohan Singh, at that time, he was the finance minister of India. And at this time, Narasimha Rao was the prime minister of India. So at that time, it was a very huge and important step that India had taken to liberalize and to revitalize its own economy. So since then, since the time of 1991, the average growth of GDP, that is gross domestic product, so hopefully now you also know the answer to the MCQ. So that has grown at an average of 7%, and it is for the first ever time since 1991, that is almost 3 decades now, that this huge negative growth or the contraction in the GDP has been seen. Secondly, as GDP contracted more than the general consensus, the annual GDP could also worsen. Now, since this is just about a quarter, for example, but still, since the mark is so deep, there is a very high chance that due to this and due to the entire deep impact that it has, the annual GDP for this year might also come down. Let's understand that which are the areas of the economy or the entire setup which have been affected even more. So, barring the agriculture, and even yesterday we had discussed that it was only the agriculture that actually was able to flourish even in the times of COVID-19 because of the two primary reasons. Firstly, as we know that due to various spatial and geographical and other factors, COVID-19 did not really hit very hard in the rural area. And that is why the agriculture or the agricultural activities were not halted at all, unlike the other economic activities that were totally halted during the lockdown period in the urban areas. Like for example, it could be any kind of industrialization, manufacturing, or any kind of jobs, etc., or any construction activities, etc., anything. So all of these were brought to an halt, but the agriculture, it continued with its own pace. And further, this year has witnessed good amounts and bountiful rains for that matter, and that is why it has been really prosperous for the farmers to make the farming and other farming processes more feasible. And that is why, except the agriculture, which has actually grown by about 3.4%, all the other sectors were affected. Now here, like for example, construction was affected by 50%, because now so mostly these numbers are all into negative. So the growth in construction sector has been minus 50%, which is very, very unfortunate, because we know that mostly at the construction sites, the people or the laborers who work are the migrant laborers. And as we know that due to the pandemic, thousands and lakhs of migrant laborers were fleeing back to their hometowns, and obviously they were not offered any kinds of construction jobs, and neither did they want to stay as well. So that is why the construction sector has been brought to a contraction of about minus 50%. Then trade, hotels, and other services, because obviously like tourism, hotel, and other kinds of services in the service sector, they were impacted very severely, because obviously people were not traveling. So since they're not traveling, they do not need to move from one place to another. So they're very less likely to avail such services. Next, manufacturing. Then again, because social distancing had to be maintained, and various other government norms had to be fulfilled, also the people, the laborers, the workers had to go back to their homes. So that is why the manufacturing activities are also put to an halt, and the contraction was about minus 39%. And then after mining, of course, which had seen a contraction of minus 23%. So basically these were the worst affected areas of the Indian economy due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Let's understand now next that what causes GDP contraction. Now, this is very important for us to get it conceptually clear into our minds that actually what is GDP, first of all, and what are the factors that actually determine the GDP. Because all in all, we are saying that the GDP has worsened and the situation is not good. COVID-19 has really impacted a lot on the GDP. But how? What actually is the GDP, and how the COVID-19 situation has impacted the GDP, and in what way can we be, can we be successful in coming out of this situation and make ourselves a better growth, give ourselves a better growth potential. Basically, there are four engines, or even we can say that these are four pillars or four sectors, major sectors of growth, or also we can say GDP. So before discussing upon that, firstly, I would like to make it clear that what do we actually mean by GDP. Now, as the name itself suggests, G stands for gross, D stands for domestic, and P stands for product. Basically, gross domestic product means the total number of production, or the total number of things, or the total value of the things or goods or services, be it anything, which was produced within the territory of the domestic limits of a particular country. That is known as the gross domestic product. Now, for example, if we take the example of India, so like for in a year, for year 2020 to 21, all the value of the goods and services which were produced within the territorial jurisdiction of India, that would be known as the gross, as in total domestic, that is within your territory, product, which is the production or the value of the products. So that basically is known as the gross domestic product. Now here again, there is a concept of gross national product, which is actually a bit different from the GDP. So we should not get confused with it. Basically, gross domestic product is more focused about the geographical territory or the geographical area of a particular state, or that means a particular country. Whereas the gross national product, as the name itself is suggesting, focuses more upon the nationality of who is producing a particular goods or services. For example, if we talk about GDP, so any income which is generated by even a foreigner within the territory of India, but if it is within the territory of India, it would be counted in a total calculation of GDP. Here, it will not pay any attention as to who was the one or what was the nationality of the person who created this particular wealth or this product or service within the territory of India. Just the fact that it was created in the territory of India is enough to be included as the GDP. But on the contrary, in the concept of gross national product, it becomes important as to who or a person of which nationality has created this product. Just taking the same case, if a person who belongs to, for example, France, has generated some kind of income or has given some value to the economy in India. So though the entire work was done within the territory of India, but since he is not an Indian national and he is a person who belongs to some other country, be it France, Switzerland, Germany, etc., any country. So that is why he or his income or his product value or service manufacturer, anything, it will not be included under the gross national product. And that is why, as we know, that nationality is the limitation and not the geographical one. That is why now a person who is of the Indian origin but does not reside within the territory of India but at any other place in the whole world, but is a national of Indian national, so his income or his product, manufacturing, service, etc., it would be calculated, its value will come under the gross national product. So that was a clear, simple understanding about that what do we mean by GDP, which is gross domestic. So just focus on the word which is the central word. Domestic means something that is produced domestically. So the geographical limitations is the most important aspect here. And gross national product means something that is produced by the national. So the nationality is the key factor over here. Now this GDP, which is the domestic one, it has four engines of growth. Firstly, private consumption. Secondly, demand from the private sector. Thirdly, government expenditure. And fourthly, net exports. Basically, through a general formula also, when we try to calculate the GDP, it's almost a total of all these four factors. So basically, private consumption plus demand from private sector plus government expenditure plus net exports is equal to the total GDP. So that is one of the most common formula of calculating the GDP. Now, in this situation, let's see that what has been the situation or what has been the role of these four factors. So if it comes to private consumption, it has decreased by minus 27%. By private consumption, we simply mean that we, like citizens of a country, how much are we consuming and how much are we demanding for any kinds of goods and services. Now, just in the previous slide, as we know that various services like trade, tourism, manufacturing, production, etc., they were not demanded by the people. So definitely the private consumption has fallen. Secondly, demand from private sector. So basically, as we know that we have the government sector and also as well as the private sector and the cooperative one as well. So the private sector also has not been very keen into investing much into this situation, because obviously, firstly, the economy has already been falling down severely, and secondly, the lockdown did not allow various activities to take a pace. So that is why the investments from the private sectors are also very minimal. Here, something that has seen, the two factors that have seen a positive growth are the government expenditure, because obviously we know that the government has been spending a lot since the time lockdown has been pronounced. Now, be it the increase in the money that was given to the schemes like Manrega, or the free distribution of food grains, or even through Ayushman Bharat and even Jan Arogya Yojana. So in the various schemes, the government has expended severely, and that is why government expenditure has in some or the other way helped to still sustain the economy. Just imagine that though the government has spent so much, the situation of economy is still so worse. Just imagine a situation wherein the government wouldn't have been active enough to spend. So what could have been the severe impact on the falling of economy? And then next, the net export. So this something else. This is one of the other factors that we have that we can actually talk about, and we can be really happy about, that the net exports even during this time have actually increased, and we have tried to put down a curve or to put down the imports in India that we have. Maybe some credit can be given to the thoughtfulness of Atmanirbhar Bharat, but yet it is in a rudimentary stage till date. But still, we have been quite successful in increasing the exports from India and bringing lesser imports to India. But let's see that private consumption, basically, it accounts for 56% of the entire GDP, and the demand from private sector accounts to about 32%, and government expenditure accounts only to 11%. And that is why maybe even after huge spending coming from the side of government, the GDP could not be raised to a considerable level. So the increase in government expenditure covers only 6% in the total fall in demand. So the net export has turned positive as India's imports have crashed more than the exports. Now, simply we can see that how we can improve the situation. So in the short term, if we talk about it, we can increase the government expenditure, which actually has been the saving factor for us till date. So the government can invest more into building roads and bridges, because the government can invest into these projects. Due to this, more construction activities would be started, and thus more employment also would be generated to the people. Secondly, they should pay the salaries of the employees that are still stuck, and so that if people will have money in their hand, definitely they will start demanding more. Once they start demanding more, the activities of production and manufacturing would come into their previous cycle. Thirdly, direct benefit transfers. Now, just this is one of the other examples, like some amount of money. Wherein a few days back we were also discussing about the UBI, which was a universal basic income idea, wherein it was like that at least some minimal amount of money should be transferred to every individual or every citizen of the country, and that could also come as an as a source of direct benefit transfers to the people who require that money to sustain their livelihood. So as the solutions that are provided by McKinsey Global Institute, they have given a lot of solutions like market linked small saving rates should be there, power sector reforms, they've suggested some things, tax buoyancy, asset monetization, etc. So these can be referred to. So this was all for the GDP thing today. So it was a very good discussion today. It was very nice discussing. So all in all, we have covered almost all the aspects of GDP. So let's see, what do we have for news in flash? Renati Chola era inscription. The inscription has been unearthed in a remote village of Kadapa district. The inscription was written in archaic Telugu and assigned to the 8th century AD during the rule of Chola Maharaja of Renadu. So this inscription has been revealed recently. Second, former President Pranab Mukherjee passed away at 84, as it was a very unfortunate news yesterday. So he became the 13th President of India in 2012 and 7 times member of the Parliament, and held several important portfolios during Manmohan Singh Prime Minister tenure. He was also awarded as Bharat Ratna in 2018 and Padma Vibhushan in 2008. Thirdly, Supreme Court's AGR final hearing. So basically, AGR is the annual gross revenue. It is the adjusted gross revenue, sorry. The bench of Justices Arun Mishra, S. Abdul Nazir and M.R. Shah heard the parties, and it allowed a 10-year timeline for payment of the AGR dues by telecom companies, will begin from April 1, 2021. So basically, the adjusted gross revenue are a kind of dues that are to be paid by the telecom companies, but it has been a huge issue that has been going on since years now. And now, for paying up that, another 10-year timeline has been allotted. The companies are required to make an upfront payment of 10% of the dues and annual installation on February 7 every year. So this was all for today. We hope it was a good session for you. Thank you so much.